What is up, everyone? Today I want to talk about a concept that's really helped me increase my creative output and helped me a ton as an artist. And I think this will help you as well if you feel like you've been wasting your creativity and you just haven't been able to make progress over the past couple of months or years. So the concept is called motion versus action, and action is something that produces results on its own, while motion doesn't. So anything that's considered like supplementary to the action is motion. So if you take this for drawing, for example, doing research, collecting references, watching tutorials, those are all like motion activities. It feels productive, you're doing something, it helps you, but it doesn't make progress on its own. While actually sitting down and doing a study, actually drawing, that would be considered action. So you have motion on one side and action on the other. Action produces results, motion doesn't. The reason a lot of us waste time in motion is because it feels productive without any of the risk. So one thing that I catch myself doing very often if I feel stressed and I feel like I have a lot of things to do is that I'll write a to-do list. So the to-do list, writing the to-do list, is motion. It doesn't produce results on its own, so it's definitely not doing anything, but it feels productive. I feel good after. It'll drop my stress by at least 50% every time I do it. Or the other thing that I also do is sometimes I let tutorials play in the background. So I'm not actually paying attention, but it feels like I'm doing something productive because I'm consuming information that I assume will be useful in the future. So it feels productive, but it's definitely not. It doesn't actually produce the results that I want. The results I want are actually requires me to get into action, actually do the thing that I want to do. One easy way to fight against this is to make sure that you're always doing the minimal amount of research. So usually the approach is to do the maximum amount of research, right? Like if you have the internet, you want to find the perfect strategy, the best study, the best reference, the best tutorial. Consume as much information as possible, but that's the wrong strategy. If you want to make progress, the right strategy is to find the minimum amount of research you can do before jumping into action. So you obviously want to do some of the motion type activities. You want to do a little bit of research, a little bit of planning, but you don't want to be caught up in this trap of just doing the motion activities and never jumping into action. So if you want to pick a strategy, spending 10% in motion and 90% in action will produce way better results than trying to do 60% of motion style activities and only doing 40% of the action. One thing to note here is that what's considered action and what's considered motion is very goal specific. So let's say, for example, you're someone who draws for fun and you just want to have fun in your sketchbook, then just doodling in your sketchbook is completely fine. That is motion, that is action. That would be considered action because you're doing the thing that you want to do. While if you want to be like a professional illustrator, just doodling in your sketchbook isn't really enough because you have to produce finished illustrations to move towards your goals. So you want to set very clear goals and then understand, okay, what am I doing that's considered motion and what's considered action? And a good example of this is if you want to be an artist full time, doing studies is important. It helps you as an artist, but it isn't the end goal. The end goal is to produce finished art. So you can't just stay in studies. And I feel like studies are kind of this trap where it's half motion, half action. It's not fully motion because you are producing results, but it's not the finished result you want. So if anything, you should put it in the motion category. Just assume that studies are good, but they're not the main goal. The main goal is to produce finished art, and that's like a completely different thing. So don't fool yourself into thinking that doing studies is enough. And I've fallen into this trap where I've studied way too much and not done enough finished work. You want to jump into finished work as soon as you can if you want to be a professional artist. If you're drawing for fun, then you don't really have to worry about doing finished work because the goal is to have fun drawing. So just having fun drawing, you're accomplishing your goal, therefore you're in action and you're not in motion. The reason you want to jump into action as soon as possible and not plan too much ahead of time is because your expectations won't match the reality of actually doing the task that you have imagined. So if you spend too much time planning, your strategy and your plan will be so far away from how things actually are that it will be useless when you actually get there. One good example of this is I had a lot of plans about how to start a YouTube channel, all the things I wanted to do. I had a bunch of ideas for different shows, but as soon as I got here and actually started making videos, I realized that all my expectations about what this would be like and how it feels was completely different. So I spent all this time strategizing and thinking and dreaming about what this would be like, but as soon as I started making videos, all of that went out the window. I realized that, oh, these are the videos that feel fun to make. This is actually what I want to do. So you have to jump into action to actually realize the proper amount of research and the proper amount of planning that you need. So don't fall into the trap of daydreaming about the things that you want to do without actually trying it. You have to try it, then you can plan, try some more, plan a little bit, do some more, and then you plan some more. Like jumping back and forth between actually being in action is the only way you'll actually make any progress at all. So one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, why is taking action so difficult? Why is this so much harder than motion style activities? Because if you've done a lot of motion style things or you've procrastinated, it just means that there's something that's hard about taking action. And asking yourself that is a very important question, because when I ask myself that question, I realize that my challenge is that I don't like the feeling of being vulnerable and dealing with failure. Like the combination of taking the risk and actually doing things is so hard, because then you are faced with your inadequacies, and that's a painful experience, especially if you have high expectations of yourself. So if you feel like you should be good at these things, then it's very difficult to enjoy the process of failure, because failure could be enjoyable if you just looked at it a little bit differently. So there's a couple of ways that we can decrease the pain of failure. One way is to be forgiving, like you would be of a friend. So imagine if one of your friends told you that they feel upset because they did a drawing that's not as good as their favorite artist. You would be very much forgiving. You wouldn't judge them for it. You might laugh because it seems ridiculous when you say it out loud. If you said it to someone else, if you said, hey, I'm having a bad day because I did a bad drawing, your friend most likely would be kind of confused, because they'd be like, I get why that's hard to deal with, but that's not a big deal. It doesn't devalue you as a human. But when you talk to yourself in your head, you might be way more judgmental. You might say horrible things to yourself because you feel like you should surpass all your expectations, when the reality is that this stuff is challenging. You're trying to learn something new. You're gonna fail. That's part of the process. Another way that you can think about this is that you get to take on this challenge. It's a fun quest that you get to go on, instead of feeling like this is something you should do. You should be good at this. Saying should is a horrible thing, and it's something that I feel like I've done a lot. And I think that it's very common in our culture where everyone wants to be a rock star. Instead of thinking about it that way, think of it as an opportunity to just have fun. It's, yes, I get to fail, and that's part of the fun. Failing is part of the opportunity. It's not an opportunity to perform perfectly. It's an opportunity to fail multiple times and then learn from that, and then eventually perform pretty well. You know, it won't be perfect, but it'll be better than where you're at right now. You also want to consider how perfectionism, because that's kind of what it is, like trying to be perfect, not trying to make mistakes, trying to have the perfect plan, all of these things, that's ego driven. It's the ego wanting to protect itself. It's, I want to do something that's so good that no one can say anything bad about it. It's a fear of being vulnerable. That's what's driving that energy. So you want to overcome your perfectionism by realizing that, hey, this is my ego that's preventing me from actually having the joys that I want. You know, if you're making art, you should be vulnerable. That's kind of the whole point. The whole point is that if you're trying to connect with people through art, or you're trying to connect with yourself, you're like, if you're just drawing in your sketchbook and trying to keep it private so that there's a space for yourself to have fun, you have to be vulnerable either to yourself or either to yourself and other people. Like, there's no way that you can do this type of stuff. You can't do creative work without vulnerability. That's at its core. That's what it is. You know, communication is about being open. So you just have to put aside the perfectionism and recognize that, yes, I can see that in myself, that I want to be perfect, but just realize that, hey, that's not what being creative is about. This task that I have, that being good at drawing, isn't about being perfect. It's about having fun. It's about taking the opportunity to enjoy this experience. So the final thing we're going to do is we're going to write out what are motion activities and what are action activities. So you have to figure out what your goal is first, right? So write your goal down in your sketchbook or whatever you have in front of you. Just write down, hey, what's my goal? Like, if you want to get good at drawing, whatever, like that might be a goal, or it could be something that's completely unrelated to art, whatever your goal is. And then write down which activities are motion and which are action activities. And what you're going to find is that you might only have one thing under the action category and many things under the motion category, because that's what I found when I did this activity. And what you want to include on this list, by the way, is this activity itself, right? The going through the exercise of writing out what's motion versus action is actually motion. Like this activity, this exercise on its own is actually considered motion because it doesn't produce results on its own. But if we take this seriously, if we take this very seriously, what you're going to find is that your creative output will skyrocket and you're going to feel much happier with yourself. You're going to feel much more courageous. you're going to feel proud of who you become because you're someone that jumps into action. If you watch any movie about a hero, any movie really is about action. Most movies are about someone who's afraid, who's in a bad place, and then they take so much action. They take massive action, and then they get somewhere. That's pretty much almost all movies, or at least most movies that I watch. Maybe I don't watch very sophisticated movies, but most action movies are at least that way. So that's it for this video. Hopefully this concept helps you guys. It helped me a ton, so hopefully it helps. If you're interested in learning how to draw, a bunch of drawing tutorials over on the website. They're completely free worksheets that you can print out that makes it way easier to learn how to draw. And I have a bunch of courses as well, and a mailing list over on the website that you can sign up for, and I'll see you guys in the next video. And also feel free to subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Whoa, 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 whoa.